Job is damn hard. And why the heck is that? Well, stick around. In this video, I'm going to share with you my perspective. Hey everybody, it's Brian from Multi-Factor Layoff, and today I want to share with you why it's so damn hard to get a job. And we hear all these reports in the news about these great labor reports that keep on coming out telling us how many open jobs there are, and there's always companies that continue to spout how hard it is to find good people. But the reality is when you're in the trenches, it does not seem that way. So in this video, let's break down why exactly it is so damn hard to land a decent job. But before we get too far into it, if you're interested in learning how to reclaim control in your career and find ways to get a job much easier, make sure you sign up for my free weekly newsletter. In it, I share concise, actionable tips on job search, writing resumes, and approaching your career with a higher degree of strategy so that you can finally take ownership back. Keep in mind, it's absolutely free, so I hope to see you there. So I've spent the better part of the last 20 years as a corporate recruiter, and I've never seen the job market so wishy-washy, so back and forth. The reality is, in today's job market, there's simply not a lot of jobs. I know that we see all these labor reports that say record number of positions open and all of this stuff, but the reality is that the people who are in the trenches actively looking for jobs day in and day out are not experiencing this overabundance of positions. In fact, it feels a little bit closer to 2020 where post-pandemic, nobody was hiring. It was very difficult to get any positions. And the jobs that were available were really low quality. They were contract positions. And it was almost like you had to beg for these table scraps that in a normal market, you probably wouldn't give the time of day. But for me, the canary in the coal mine is looking at the recruiter market, because once you see recruiters being laid off, it's a good indicator that there's not jobs to fill. For example, we just saw Google do another round of layoffs specifically targeting recruiters. That's not a good sign, and that's typically the head of the spear for the rest of the job market to follow suit. So if you're seeing these big companies targeting recruiters specifically in layoffs, that's a really bad sign that the job market's not nearly as robust. There's no recruiters because there's no jobs for them to fill. And the second thing is that a lot of these jobs that are out there and posted are actually fake. I actually posted a recent video about this, so you should check that one out if you haven't seen it yet. I actually have my own experience with this, where I've had hiring managers ask me to publish a job that we had no intention of filling. And you might say, well, why the heck would a company do that or a hiring manager do that? And it's a common thing with, in my opinion, with kind of like old school ways of approaching talent acquisition where they don't take into account candidate experience. You'll typically have somebody say, hey, let's put a rec out there or a job requisition, a job posting, and let's just collect some applications so that when we do hire 6 months from now, 8 months from now, 9 months from now, that we'll have a slate of candidates and we can move quickly. But the reality is, candidates that are sourced in that period of time are usually only options in that period of time because they go off and they find other jobs and move on with their life. They're not sitting around waiting for some crappy little company that nobody's ever heard of to give them a job opportunity 6 or 8 months into the future. But nonetheless, there's a rash of these jobs that have been posted, and I've actually pushed back on them myself when hiring managers asked me to do the same. Also, had these same hiring managers ask me to put job recs out there just to see if there was somebody that maybe would land in their lap that was particularly strong. So in other words, they weren't really looking to fill a job, but if they found an absolute perfect fit, maybe would consider it. But when you look at all the people who are applying for these jobs, they're all jumping through all of these unnecessary hoops only to have a very, very slim chance at actually getting a phone call back, let alone getting an offer. And with the increase of all these layoffs that we've been seeing over the last 18 months in particular, and I have seen a little bit of an uptick again recently. You might hear some other sides saying, well, they're actually starting to hire more. I don't know, I'm just not really seeing it. You have a lot of increased competition. So a job that might only get 100 applications in a normal job market is now receiving 1,000. I've even seen some as high as 2,000 or 3,000 candidates for a single position. Now with those odds, it's nearly impossible to stand out, let alone try to get through an interview process and get hired. So a lot of people who are struggling in their job search start to internalize these issues, constantly getting these rejections and wondering what's wrong with them. And I actually put a LinkedIn post up about this recently, and essentially what I said is that there's nothing wrong with you. For a lot of job types, you just have a competition issue. Now that obviously amplifies any issues that you might have with resumes or your strategy on applying, your networking, things like how you interview. But the fact of the matter is that you're competing against a lot more candidates than is in the normal market, and that's just the reality of it. Not to mention, a lot of these same companies that laid off almost immediately turned right back around and posted those same jobs as contracts or short-term assignments. And I guess if you want a little litmus test about whether or not you work for a toxic employer, if you got laid off from the full-time job and you saw them replace it with a contract position, probably a good indicator. And because there's so many new candidates in the job market and you're up against this stiff competition, employers can be abnormally picky. Let's face it, they were always picky to begin with, but when you're looking at a job market where they're getting between 2,000 and 3,000 applications for a role, employers can afford to be extraordinarily picky with their requirements and what they're demanding, because there's people out there that have the skills that they're looking for. Now, it may not seem like it for the average job seeker, where they're putting in application after application for jobs that they're seemingly qualified for and still getting rejections without even so much as a recruiter phone screen. And again, that underlies the importance of having a really solid resume and an application strategy that gets you in front of the recruiter more quickly. If it wasn't bad enough as it is, employers are also really indecisive. If you talk to any recruiter, they're going to tell you that the single most frustrating thing that they deal with in their day-to-day is indecisive hiring managers who are wishy-washy and they seem to change their mind at a whim. First, they're looking for this profile, then they're looking for this other profile, and oh, wait a minute, there's this new initiative coming down, and that's actually going to change the whole look and feel of the job to begin with, so let's start over with a new recruitment. And you could be acing each round of the interview, you get to the final one, and you find out that the senior manager doesn't agree with the rest of the interview team, so it's blow the whole thing up and start over again. Of course, all of our favorites is when you get all the way to the end and you get to the job offer, and then the head count gets canceled. And unfortunately, a lot of recruiters have had to resend offers against their will because the change of the market conditions, or at least that's what they tell us. And of course, this is really frustrating for the candidate who's jumped through endless hoop after endless hoop, gone through application processes that are convoluted and cumbersome. They've uploaded their resume and then had to add a manual application in addition to it. They've gone through assessments, 6 or 7 rounds of interviews. They spent the week preparing company projects, and in some cases have even been asked to work for free, all to get ghosted in the end. Simply put, most corporations' hiring processes completely suck. And you would think that major corporations, after all these years and all this money invested in talent acquisition, would be able to figure this out, but it just seems like it is not something that they're good at. Now, in defense of my recruiting brethren, there are a lot of really good recruiters out there who really do truly care about candidate experience and wanting to do the right thing. But it only takes a few bad apples to ruin it for the bunch, and more than one recruiter has been made to look bad by an indecisive or a flaky hiring manager. Okay, Brian, we get it. The job market is totally crappy and it sucks to get a job. That doesn't help me, the person who is actively looking. So what can you do to combat this? First thing that you want to do is make sure that your resume is airtight and is honed into the jobs that you're applying to, because when you're dealing with all this competition and you're dealing with picky hiring managers and crappy processes, that's really the only option that you have. In other words, you have to stand out from the competition. And if you don't know how to write a good resume, that's going to be absolutely critical for you. I actually created a course called Resume Rocket Fuel, which does teach you how to write a professional quality resume quickly and easily. There's all kinds of templates there. But an even better way to get hired is to skip the recruiter altogether. And you do that through targeted networking. And most people don't leverage networking the right way. They have no idea how to approach it, and they do it very ineffectively. Because people have very little understanding about how